back to the Berg podcast. Thanks for joining us today. With me today is Ford.
Hey, how's it going?
And Dan.
Hey, everybody.
And in our last podcast, we were talking a little bit about, in a roundabout way, being aware of the context or environment that something's happening in, right? I referenced a podcast that I had been listening to, a pastor out in Southern California, Erwin McManus, and he was talking about having been at an event, interacting with people, but not necessarily like it was, I think he was talking about a party or something like that. And he was at the party, not necessarily participating in the same way some others, came out of the event and saw a man who probably was trying to convey a similar message in a much different way, behaving in what a lot of people would describe as, probably
Abrasive,
annoyance, almost maybe borderline harassing, etc. And that I thought that was interesting to hear, like how you sort of insert yourself into context or into an environment can make an enormous difference in what actually happens in the moments that follow that, right?
Oh, I mean, we've seen it so many times, like, because in our industry, there is such challenges as far as the combativeness that we deal with. And so, where do you draw the line of standing up for yourself? How do you stand up for yourself, versus, understanding that context? Because, we've seen things where other companies too, but like they stand up for themselves and maybe in a certain way, and then maybe they didn't get to bid the next job. Like you can stand up for yourself, but that doesn't mean yelling and screaming and being obtuse. It means basically trying to work within what you can, have a conversation, talk through things with people. And, at the end of the day, there's humans on the other end of whatever the challenge is. So if you can get them on the phone, or talk to them face to face, we've talked about that before. Like it's a really challenging conversation, face to face, phone next, email and text way down the list, because you can't get the context out of what is being said the same way you can in a verbal communication.
Yeah, for sure. That I think it's human nature, right? And maybe it's just the way I act, but like I can have like civil conversation with people about a wide variety of things, whether or not I agree or disagree, as long as like it's approached from the right perspective. If you approach a situation, a conversation, maybe an argument, and you're open-minded and you're communicating and you're trying to both listen to what the other person's position is and state your position or why you agree or disagree. I think a lot of times you can bridge some communication gaps by just being a human being. But if you're in a situation, and this is just me personally, maybe, but where like someone's just trying to ram something down your throat, they're really pushing, and they've got no room for hearing what you have to say or how you feel about something. Like my immediate defense mechanism is just like the wall goes up. Like
Conversation's over.
Yeah, I'm not going to yell and scream. That's just not who I am typically. But I have no interest in comprehending what it is that's coming out of your mouth anymore. Like it doesn't matter to me. And I think that's like part of what we're talking about here, potentially, is understanding who you're participating in and what's really trying to be accomplished.
And so when you talk about who you're participating with and what's going on, sort of, because what comes to mind is like you and I are different. We know we've talked about that.
Yeah,
like I am more combative than you are. But I don't inherently want to engage in a fight, right? And I don't want to outright bulldoze people because I won't get what I want. Like, let's just be honest. If I'm trying to accomplish something, I'm more likely to accomplish that if I can approach it in a more civil way that I can make it work for both of us. But I am willing to ramp it up. Like if you want to get in an argument, a wall's not going to go up. We'll get into an argument, and I'm still going to try and get what I want. I'm just going to I'll try and wait it out. I'll fight as long as you want to fight about it and try and get there. So I think that there's different personalities react in different ways. Mm-hmm. But I think regardless, the conversation is the same. If you'd like to accomplish something, it has to be mutual. Very rarely are you just going to walk in and like slam your fist on a desk and be like, I want this. And they'd be like, oh, yes, absolutely. You may not get something they were going to give you.
Right.
If you walk in with that attitude. So it's funny because to me, it doesn't mean you can't get in an argument. You can't fight. It can't be combative, but you have to be open to the others. You have to realize there's two sides to this. You know what I mean? This just happened the other day and, you heard it through the office. I unfortunately did not close my door. And so other people had to listen to me argue with somebody. But, in the argument, I was not trying to be, in my mind, unreasonable, but they were going to hear me. And we were going to reach a middle ground or we weren't going to reach a compromise, and that's where we are. If that's their choice, that's sort of the wall going up, right? Like as if you're going to give nothing, then there's no reason to have a conversation. It's fine. We can get off the phone right now. We don't need to talk anymore. Because if you have nothing to give, then yes, we're at an impasse and that's where we are. Let's not argue about it. But if there can be back and forth, then that's fine. You can have your opinion. You know what I mean? You and I, Brian and I can differ on a number of things of how we want to approach something, but as long as we can have a conversation that is balanced, like I wouldn't even say civil in most cases with you and I, the way, because I know how you are
sure.
In terms of it not being productive to get into an argument. So I'll say like, okay, that's not the route I'm going to take with Brian. Though I do feel, and Ford, I'd like your input on this. I do feel like that many times the person initiating the fight has to cause a fight, right? Like in other words, like you and I could completely disagree on something, but as long as we come into it that we know we disagree and we have to reach some resolution, there's not an argument.
Sure.
An argument occurs when someone says like they slam their fist down and like, well, okay. Well then, and then is it the person who's going to say like, okay, we're not even talking anymore, or the person willing to get in a fight with them? But regardless, the fight occurs because of that. Someone has to start a fight.
Well, I was thinking about this, like part of what the context is like everybody you talk to on a job site, from clients to vendors to whatever, how you interact with them can have long lasting positive or negative results.
Mm-hmm.
But in the business world, there's like 3 words that, they always say every fight with your spouse, there's always a couple words you could say that if you just want to go nuclear. And there's the same thing in business. And that is call the lawyers, right? I mean, you're having a conversation and someone says, call the lawyers. And it's basically, that at that point, there is no more productivity going to come out of this meeting, right? But the challenge is that statement is thrown around so much when 2 grown adults should be able to have a conversation and figure something out. And probably the truth is that it's always going to be a compromise. You're never going to be able to like, well, one side, whatever. Like that's how a good deal should be done. But it's just funny how many times you hear that. Like I was somewhere, I was playing golf with a guy and like, I don't know what was happening, but like literally I heard him say, well, just call the lawyers. And I was just laughing because like I heard 3 minutes of a conversation. And that was like the automatic defense was call the lawyers.
That was
right?
the default. Like that's the escape button.
Yeah.
Like I'm not going to deal with that.
Yes. Just call some. Yeah. Say, and you know no one's going to win.
No, that's what I was just going to say.
I was just going to say
every good lawyer will tell you their best work is done when 0 people are happy. Yeah. Right. Like
except when they got a big check from someone paying them. Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, I think our world. I mean, you drive down 95, and every billboard is a law firm trying to hustle you for everything that they possibly. So like people just have gotten to this. Again, it's kind of like passing it off because people can't have that conversation that might be tough because they just, well, I'm just going to hide behind this person or that person or whatever the scenario is. And so it's very challenging. But I think that like, I don't know how many times we thought we were at a bad spot in something with work and a telephone call happened. And we got past it because in our work, there's always something coming up. Yeah. And it depends on the quality of the people on the other side, if they're used to doing this type of work, if they're used to dealing with contractors or not. But like amazing what a telephone call, not a voicemail, not a text, not an email, but what a voice or a meet in person can do to deal with so many issues that are trivial when you actually sit down on it. Some of them are not, but some of them you're just like, why are we having this conversation?
Yeah,
like you're just making assumptions because of what you probably got in an email and you're like, oh boy, here we go.
Right. And people are, in the example of the other day, and I mean, this podcast will come out and whenever it's going to come out, I think we'll be beyond it at that point. But, in this conversation, all I really wanted to do was get to the point where we could agree on the value of what we disagreed on. Because then we can say like, okay, I don't actually want to talk about why we disagree. I don't care. We disagree. Let's get to the value of it. And then what can you live with and I live with? And not try and go over, did you or did you not do this work? It's really irrelevant to me at this point. It's the person who it was relevant to was the foreman on the job, right? Or their foreman on the job. When you get to the point where you're having that sort of thing, and it's funny you say about call the lawyer, that was literally, I said it, but I didn't say I'm going to call my lawyer. I said, you are either going to be willing to negotiate or you're going to call your lawyer. I really don't care. Like, I think we should be able to solve this.
Mhm.
But if we're going to solve it, you have to be willing to negotiate. If you are not, then that's where you are. And then just tell me and we don't need to talk anymore. You know, and it was, it's the craziest thing because if you create that scenario, I will likely never want to work with you again. You will never want to work with us again. So that's not good for either company. Then you start to call lawyers and it gets expensive and you'll spend more money. You know, the number of times our attorneys have said, we really feel good about this, but it's going to cost you more money than it is that you'll get when we win. And it's like, okay, well,
Pass.
that doesn't make any sense.
How is that productive?
Yeah,
Right?
how is
Like,
that productive?
Just so I can say I won.
Just
an
so I can
argument?
say
Yeah,
I
yeah,
won,
right.
you know, but in so many times it's the communication, the boots on the ground communication every day, you know, and just recently, actually, I got a completely separate thing that went on is a client that we are developing a really good relationship. I think we like to work with, we've done okay. They've been happy with us and we had a bad week, you know, a couple of things didn't work out. A foreman had some commitments come up from a medical side, needed to be out. And the job was in a rough spot where there was some soil conditions that we were having trouble dealing with. And it's getting to crunch time where the job wants to get closed out. Everybody gets antsy and it's going back and forth. And there's just these emails going back and forth. And our people were trying to call, but weren't getting people on the phone. And then one of the higher ups sent me an email. So I'd be so I'd have visibility. And so we go through this whole thing. And so I continually try and follow up, but I said, like, I'm not going to get involved unless you need me to get involved. And so I checked on it again today and he was like, yeah, it's like radio silent, but they've moved on. You know, we're talking about the next 2 contracts we're going to get and they're just not talking about it. But it was so crazy because it's similar to the lawyer thing. Like all these emails were sent so that if there was an argument at some point, they could reference this email they sent, but they didn't actually want to talk about it. And I don't even know that they cared. You know what I mean? But in other words, it was so
CYA,
odd.
just
It
because.
was just CYA, but because it was
there in case we need to hold it over your head.
In case we need to hold it over your head and just but all it did was just stoke the fire. You know what I mean? Because if we had reacted, like if I had gotten involved, it would have had to escalate because I would have said, why are your people sending these emails but not answering the phone? Which then the other person, what are they going to do except go to their people and say like, hey, now I got to deal with this. Are you really not answering your phone? Like in other words, it would be this back and forth, but sort of where Ford said about what makes it go nuclear.
Yeah.
Our people took the opposite route and they were like, you know what? Let's just step back, take a deep breath. We're doing what we need to do. We acknowledge the issue with being a little bit shorthanded and getting, having these materials. Let's just deal with it, move on and see if they just drop it. And it wasn't to avoid the problem. It was because it was not actually, it
wasn't an impasse. We just needed to,
we needed to move by, you know, but, and sometimes that the most valuable piece sometimes in the foreman and the field staff's communication is knowing how to engage with that specific client or that specific environment in a way that gets an outcome that is beneficial.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because truthfully, like, and I think we've talked about it here on the podcast before, like each person's like the culmination of their experiences. So at some point in time, that foreman figured out from a different experience in a different environment that like, if I blow up here, it's just going to go bad. So if I figure out a way to either like accommodate, appease, get through the situation, it's probably best for everyone involved.
Yeah.
That's big.
That's big. That's a big step because I mean, it takes their saying like, you know what? Because you would have to think based on the emails, I am certain that both our foreman and our project manager were 90% sure they were right.
Right.
You know what I mean? So you have to sit there when you know you're right and just let somebody send an email and then you try and call them and they don't answer. You know, like that's a lot of just burying your pride. There was another thing that happened not long ago, and that's one of the foremen said that to me. It was like, I will bury my pride and do this if we need to do it. If we don't need to, I won't. But if we need to, I will. And I don't think I'm wrong, but I acknowledge what you're saying.
Well, and I think that's the challenge. Is you're not burying your pride. You're just realizing that the greater good, right? I mean, it's not like you're dying on we always joke about like, that's not the hill I want to die on,
Yep.
right?
Mhm.
Which, is a military term and much more
Sure.
detailed, but there's just that like, you know what, that's not the place I want to, that's not the fight I want to do. And like, it's also interesting when you're dealing with these people, I was always raised, you have one mouth, two ears, listen more, because sometimes you can find things.
That's a good Ford line.
Yeah,
where
one mouth, 2 ears.
you realize that client, for some reason, has an issue like with if you're going in their driveway and like for some reason they're just really particular about the driveway. So at the end of the day, if you broom that driveway off every day, they don't care what's happening on the job. But heaven forbid they drive home and they come across dirt on their driveway, then everything else is going to be under the microscope because that one little thing. I think back to Merck days and like, well, the VP comes out this back door over here. Nothing else is talked about. But then we, like if we would have listened to that saying and shoveled that first, we might not have had another issue. But once he came out and stepped in snow,
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like it's amazing how those little things, if you find out what people's soft points are, it really can go a long way because they feel like they're listened to, they feel like they're heard, and it might not have anything to do with the rest of the project. A couple weeks ago, we got an email from some neighbor on a job, and he was just spouting off, and I think clicked on every email address he could find and whatever. Came to find out it wasn't even us, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like our truck was there, and when something else happened and saw the truck and decided to,
They were upset. They saw our name attached to whatever
Right.
it is they thought they were upset with.
Yeah. And like,
And that's the thing to consider,
Yeah.
right? Is you, I appreciate when our team and all of us consider that we're building something bigger than ourselves,
Right.
And as we say, it feeds a lot of mouths. So be mindful of it when you're out there, because it's not that you're a target, but we want people to perceive us in a certain way. We want to behave that way. We want to be that way as a company and as individuals. So if you act contrary to that, or you behave, carry yourself different than that, and someone says something, it becomes hard, because it's like, okay, well, that's not really who we want to be, right? And we want to be this same thing every day, But Ford's point about knowing the VP. So a funny thing happened this week is we got a call at one of our sites for snow that we had too much equipment on site, and so I felt like I was baited, quite honestly, because they told me the claim was that I had moved all of my pushers to this site because I can't possibly need that many pushers there. And so I engaged a little because it was a call, and I said, like, okay, that's 100% false. Actually, I've been arguing I don't need that many pushers there for 5 years, but you require me to put that many there because of what you say I need. I have them there because on paper you've said I have to put them there. Now the person saying I don't need that many, which was my point exactly. So I engaged a little. I called a couple of our people. We're pretty swamped right now. So I said, okay, I'll get out to the site and look at it just to see what's really there. Make sure I know. I get to the gate, and there is a tent that has to hold 5,000 people in the parking lot adjacent to where we store our stuff all year, including over the summer. And I'm like, okay, why was that not the call? Why was the call not, hey, we're having a global headquarters partners meeting. We set the tent up immediately adjacent to all of your stuff. It's in our way. We don't want the people to see it. Can you move it?
Put it somewhere else?
Right. Can you put it somewhere else? That's a completely different conversation.
Right.
And I'm not going to be happy about it that I got 1 week to move a bunch of stuff that I didn't think I had to touch. But I understand that makes perfect sense. What doesn't make sense is arguing about how many pushers I like.
Right.
If I had half the pushers there, they still don't want them there.
Right.
That's not the point, But their foray into the conversation was baiting a fight. Luckily, I realized what was going on because I went. But if I hadn't, I would have continued down that road and argued about whether I should or shouldn't have a certain amount of equipment on site, which was not at all the discussion. The discussion was, we're having a partners meeting. We'd like you to move the stuff to somewhere that they're not going to look at it.
well, and that's part of this conversation that's interesting because there's another one very tied to that. But it's also, we have to understand that it's whispered down the lane.
Mm-hmm.
And the person that might be telling you something in the field, we don't know what was actually said from whoever was above them.
Yep.
because there was a snow season, and it was one morning, and we're getting all these calls. You got to get to this building. You got to get to this building. And we're like, whatever. Like, we were just new to the site. We didn't even know what that building was yet. We were just doing the site. Later, we find out that there was a board meeting at 6 a.m. that morning at that building. The funny part is, if somebody could have told us that ahead of time, we would have had the entire crew in that area.
Right.
That area would have been spit shine.
Yeah.
But the communication as it got through from the powers that be to the middlemen to the field staff to our staff, that wasn't the conversation that we ever got to hear.
Right.
And so sometimes you have to kind of balance that too, because you're not sure if the guy in the field, not that he's not telling you accurate, but if he heard correctly or if somewhere along the chain something got varied. So you just always kind of like leaning back a minute because you're not sure. You know, you're taking the person for their word, but you're trying to understand because it's contrary to what you either expected, what you see, those types of things, but you're not sure where that information came from. And it's like, it's amazing how just a different context of something would have been the same. We could have got a completely different result if we could have understood the context of it.
It reminds me of, any of the movies like 300's one that comes to mind, but when they're like, and there's like a war and they're like, hold, you know what I mean? Like if you just, and it's not the easiest thing for me to do. I did not grow up somewhere that they say have one mouth and two ears. I'm pretty sure you have at least two mouths that you talk out of in Jersey. It's hard to sit there and hold when you want to engage, but another thing that came to mind as you were talking was, and we sometimes talk about projects, sometimes don't, but sure. Longwood, it's been pretty clear. We've been on Longwood. We've been there a long time. It's been publicized. We've shown it. Longwood, one of the most difficult pieces that we have to deal with is the architects. And the architects are walking the site the other day. And they took a picture and explained to Brad how ridiculous something we have been saying was ridiculous to everyone that would listen for 2 years was. Right? They were looking at the trees being planted on the slope and everybody digging everything up for the irrigation after they made a string line the final grade. And Brad almost didn't know what to say when he explained it to me. He's like, I almost didn't know what to say because it was like, we have been saying this exact thing. It makes no sense for us to fine grade to a string line before you put the trees, the irrigation, and the electric in because they're going to dig it up.
Right.
And the guy's taking pictures to show that the soil is completely disrupted, because it's in layers, right, at Longwood. And when Brad told me, I laughed out loud because I was like, this is so crazy. Like if the right person would have just listened, right, been open to listening.
Or pass it along to the right person.
Right. But the reality is at probably multiple points, they weren't. And it could have been, I can't tell you if it's because of the message delivered or the message received. I can't tell you if they didn't hear it because the message we were delivering is, we want to charge you more to make us do this. We want to charge you because we're going to have to clean it up, or this is not productive. This is stupid and not productive. Yeah. That is probably some variation of what they heard. But what we were really saying is it is crazy to fine grade before anyone does anything. Like it'd be like paving before I fine grade. It doesn't make any sense. You're going to dig it all up. And if they could have heard the message that we wanted to deliver, we could have likely saved ourselves a lot of trouble and detail work, fine grading something that would get destroyed. And it might have even changed the order they did things, because if they knew that was going to happen, they may have tried to said, you know what would happen if we planted the trees first and did all the irrigation and the subgrade work like happens in a normal environment, because it's the only way we can guarantee the trees are going to be in the soil we want is if we plant it that way. Yeah. So, but they didn't hear the message. And I can't say it's because they didn't listen. It could have been we didn't send it right.
Yeah. Growing up, my parents would say a lot, think before you speak, right? And I think that's a popular sentiment, especially for parents to tell young people, because young people have a propensity to just blurt out whatever dumb thoughts passing through their head. And
or good thought.
Could be good, could be bad, could be way off base. Yeah, whatever it might be. But I think that's important that you say that, because I think part of that is considering what the message is, right? If you can think about it for a moment and consider what is the message you're actually trying to convey, and how will it be received? It may or may not change the vernacular, the body language, the tone of voice, whatever it might be that you're actually using.
Yeah,
and
for sure. I mean, in this specific,
the mode of communication might be different. Like you talked earlier, like let's get on the phone.
Yep.
Like you see something in an email, it lacks emotion. It's interpreted one way or another,
and it's based on where you are when you receive the email.
Yeah.
If you were really in a really good mood or a really bad mood.
Right.
And in this specific example I'm talking about, that was the first thing that happened. I was like, okay, how did I convey this message? Like once it was to the point where I was involved, what did I, like, not what did I say, but you know what I mean? All those things, like what was the context? Was I already after them on it? Was I mad? Like what did I do that if I had done it differently, they may have heard my message and it might have had some impact, so that next time I can myself try and be different, but also say to the team, like, hey, if we end up in this scenario again, think about this, what was almost what you're saying, if you could like pare it down, what was the message? Like
root cause analysis
right.
of the message.
You know what I mean?
Ask the 5 whys.
Right? Like, I mean, at the end of the day, what we're really saying, like if I, like as I worked this through and I did this, I almost ended up that if I had said, hey, your trees are not going to be in the proper soil metric because you're doing this in this order, how would you like us to do it? I didn't say it costs more money. I didn't say it's difficult for me. I didn't say it's stupid. I didn't say you didn't think about it. I just said, if you want the trees planted in that exact soil metric, how would you like me to do that? Knowing that they're going to dig in it. You know what I mean? Like, and as I said that the second time, I changed it again. Like it wasn't as good. I don't know what I said the first time, but in my own head, when I just said it to you, it was better. The second time I said it, already I had twisted it that I don't like what you're making me do. Right. And that's going to make them put their back up, And so I couldn't even repeat it twice. So it's really hard to ask people in the field to do it, but it's a big piece. You want to see the best, the most successful jobs, the most effective and positive with the clients. And ironically, a lot of times you find a job that there was a lot of changes on, that things were adjusted, that we adjusted things and may or may not have increased costs, but the owner heard the message and knew it was for their best interest and acted on it. And so it's not about the problem that you run into. It's about the solution. It's about how do you communicate it in a way that is effective, because none of our guys, I assure you that we do not go out and say like, okay, so the job was bid at X. We need to make plus 5% on change orders. That meeting never happens at Berg Construction. It's not how we run.
We actually talked about it the other day. We hate change orders.
Yeah. It slows us down and messes up my schedule.
Yeah. Like everybody you see, like that's outside the world, like, or like, just very on the, you love change orders. No, I hate change orders. We're supposed to be on that job for 6 weeks, get in, get out, and get on to it.
Yeah.
Now we're there for 12 weeks. That crew's supposed to have been 2 other places by now. The client's not happy because they're paying more money.
Their budget's messed up.
Right. We're usually delayed because of it, because we found an issue somewhere along the way. Like nothing about a change order is beneficial, because you can't recoup the cost you lose waiting for something to change, even if there is extra revenue that comes in from it. Like that's loud and clear from like, I don't know how many people we talk to that all hate them, but they just think that that's like, that's where, and then we're going to really scrutinize it because we think you're trying to, like, no, we're just trying to get the job done. So here's the change order. Here's what we need to make the differences up, and we need to move on, not wait an extra 6 weeks to get something. Cause then we're going back to a job we haven't been on for a while. Like it's amazing how that message is one that's out there that is just completely false.
Well, and if I try and like practice what I'm preaching about, what Ford's saying, right, with this change order thing, like if you just modify that message a little bit, right, and you think about it, most of our contracts provide guidance on what the allowable markup and charges are on a change order. I have to show you the actual cost, and then I'm allowed to mark it up at a number that the owner came up with, not Berg Construction. So just as I see it, like, well, you really get them on the change orders, except how? Because you make me show you the cost, and then you pay me what you want to pay me, which may or may not be the same or more or less than I was charging you at the start. But I didn't just get to mark it up. You know what I mean? I didn't just get to say, we're going to get them on this one. You know what I mean? For the most part, being transparent with the industry, for the most part, when you walk into a contract, you know which items you would be happy if they ran in excess and which items you are got a problem if they run in excess, right? You know where you're tight and you know where you have some fluff. You know that going in. you can't really control it, but but a change order, that's just a cost that's going to get marked up. That's going to blow your schedule up, and they're going to be mad because they're going to say, like, I don't know why it is always the person who creates the change order's fault, because you didn't own the site, and it doesn't just have to be site work. You know what I mean? It can be any of the trades building those things. It's like, well, you got to charge this extra money. It was like, no, what happened was either someone didn't put something in these plans, or it wasn't accurate, or you decided you wanted something. Like, if you decide you want something extra, that costs extra because you decided it, but that's not how it's looked at. It's looked at like we're going after change orders. So it is a tricky situation, and somewhere that really effective communication can be really helpful.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, communication, it can be tricky. It certainly can be complicated at times, and definitely something that you takes additional consideration, for sure.
And it's not something like you think about it. And this sort of goes back to one of the other podcasts, but very few people that decided they wanted to be in construction decided that because they enjoy communicating with people.
No.
Right? Like, that wasn't...
Public speaking wasn't number one on their list.
They weren't like in a public speaking class and said, like, what I'd really love to do is I'd love to, do work building foundations for buildings and put in utilities. That makes sense. Like, that's not how they got there.
Well, when's the last time you practiced, right? Like, when's the last time you said, well, you know what, tomorrow I'm going to have a conversation. So what I'd like to do is reherse that two or three times today
and be ready to go.
And understand how it makes you feel before I actually say the words to your face. And,
right. So, you know what I mean? You think about that, and it's so funny. It's you're asking many people who selected their profession based on not wanting to do this thing to be good at doing this thing.
Sure.
And then it doesn't work out because it turns out the other people also did not pick their position by wanting to be good communicators.
Right.
You know what I mean? They wanted to be, a lot of times an owner wants to, they want action. They want things built. They want to turn things over. They want to sell a building. They don't want to talk to you about it. And they certainly don't want it to cost more. So that's one of the toughest environments to work in our industry, is dealing with that, is how you deal with the relationship of the owner or the GC to the contractor or subcontractor, and how to communicate effectively in a way that gets your point across, but is clean, and that's maybe the most we can say is we've come at it from different angles, but try and think about why you're having the conversation and what you're actually trying to achieve, and try and deliver that message cleanly to the person you're talking to, without all the superfluous information that may or may not matter to you, but is not relevant to them.
Yeah. That's deep. It's a lot to think about. I'm like trying to think through it right now, even as you're saying it. Yeah. Like, we're just going to sit here in silence for a moment while we all ponder.
I'm sure that's not good for a podcast.
Just adding length. For
next podcast will be 20 minutes of silence.
20 minutes of silence.
Silence, reflection.
We just won't post it, everybody. So you just do that on your own.
Yeah, when we skip an episode number, that's what happened.
Yeah.
All right, that's a good place to wrap it up. Thanks for joining us today, folks. And hopefully you got something from this. And if not, maybe come back for another one.